Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about Magnus Archives Season 2, and let's get right into it. If you don't know what this is, I do have a review for the first season, but a short, brief descriptor. Magnus Archives is a podcast, like a radio show style podcast, about fears and about stuff going on with those fears. It's very, very good. The production quality is very high. It sounds great. It is wonderful, and the writing is exceptional. There are so many callbacks. It's one of the first things in a long time that I've actually taken notes for, and I'm not going to show you those notes now because we're not in the spoiler section yet, but I have a full document with notes, with episode numbers, episode titles, important names, who gave the statement, and all of that. And if you are looking for a good horror-themed show, this is what you should listen to. This is 100% a radio show that is worth listening to, especially if you love horror. Let's get into it now, though, because I can't go any longer without talking about what's going on. I'm getting so excited, I keep moving the green screen. Let's get into Season 2 of the Magnus Archives. Okay, where to begin? I was wrong about a lot of stuff, but I was right about some stuff, and that's really cool. And again, with this video, please don't tell me what I'm right and wrong about. I want to continue experiencing this as I go. Please don't give me any spoilers for anything past Season 2 in here, because I'm not past Season 2 yet. But let's talk about Season 2. So, right off the bat, coming off of Human Remains and everything that happened there at the end of Season 1, I keep moving the green screen because I'm too excited. Coming off the end of that, we have the cast is not doing great. Sasha's been replaced. Again, there are spoilers from here on out. Just keep that in mind. I've said it already. And Jonathan Sims is losing his mind. It starts off with him panicking over what happened to Gertrude and going down into the tunnels and that leave moment. But also, it builds over the course of this, of him trying to understand how everything happened with Gertrude and what happened there, and he feels like he can't trust any of them, which winds up being really helpful for a long time, but also drives a wedge between him and Tim that leads to another reveal, which is wonderful and amazing. And I should probably mention at this point, this is my third time recording this video because I just could not get my thoughts in a concise manner because I'm manic about this series. I love this series, and I absolutely love this season. The slow degradation of Jonathan Sims as he lends closer and closer to complete insanity almost is wonderful, and I love it. It is perfect tragedy for me, and where the season ends is incredible. We're going to get to that. But we have a little while here where we get some tapes and we get some statements that seem almost unrelated to what's going on. They're not, but they seem that way at first. It's Grifter's Bone and Section 31 and Tightrope and Blood Bag that give us this feeling of, you know, hey, yeah, these are little stories in the world that still tie into everything but aren't super related to it all. They super are, but things like Grifter's Bone being a reference to death again. And I said in the first review that I had a feeling that there were entities that these were related to because they all seemed like distinct from each other, right? They all seemed important in their own different ways. And we had things like the lightless flame mentioned in First Aid and the dark that comes up multiple times and the vast open sky and things like that. Death popping up over and over again. And Michael and what's ever going on with him. And this season gives us the reveal that they are, in fact, entities, but they're not as unrelated to each other as I originally thought. And they're not even really doing this on purpose. But I have taken to calling them because the I is mentioned later on. And so Drifter's Bone clearly is tied in somehow with the death, or the death, however it's going to be called. I don't know. I assume I'll find out because the I got named. And we're going to get to that because Crusader is maybe my favorite episode next to the last one. But Section 31, of course, gives us the information about the police officers that have been sectioned, sets up everything with Basira and Daisy for later, and everything that's going to happen there. These episodes may seem slightly unrelated when it's all happening because you just want to get back into what's going on with John and with the crew, but they're really not. And stuff like Literary Heights, where we have "I am yours" being said with this vast open sky, just I don't know if that's the sky or the vast, or because vast is used a lot, or if it's the openness or something like that. But this entity is, they're all horrifying in their own way, right? And I'll get into which episodes really hit me this season, just like I did with last season. But each of them has a thing going on. And in the middle of all this, we have these supplementals as John tries to piece together what's going on with Sasha and how she's acting weird, and with Martin and how he's acting weird. It almost seems like he cares about Jonathan's well-being. That's strange. And with Tim, who's getting more and more upset and frustrated, and that leads to their big argument where Tim finds out he can't quit. Something is going on, and of course now we know, because of episode 80, that it's probably the influence of the eye. But little by little by little, this series of this season, the series of episodes, slowly starts to lead us to some pretty big reveals. Brecon and Hope and the coffins and the stairway that leads down and how it's connected to the Lucas family and the graveyard and boatswain's call ship, and Trevor's alive and he's back, and that's an incredible episode there. The stuff with trail rations and the slow build to that moment where I figured out really early what was going on and I knew it was coming, but I still could never have expected, come meet, be my guest, and let thy gifts to me be blessed. Look, there's so much. There's so much. Recluse with Agnes showing up again, and the tables, and the teeth. The Observer Effect is probably the first episode in this season, though, because I'm going to get back to Crusader, which I think is my favorite one, but the Observer Effect is the first one that I actually got chills listening to. There's a lot of stuff in this season that is really evocative and really strong. But obviously fear is something very subjective, right? Each episode is going to have a different effect on different people, and the Observer Effect specifically behind you. I had to pause, and I was very unsettled for a minute before I was able to just keep going again. But then it happens again. It happens again in Distant Cousin, and we're going to get to that. But let's pull back to Crusader, because we've been jumping around a lot. I know I've been jumping around a lot. I can't help it. I'm crazy about this show now, and I feel like I'm all over the place as I'm piecing together all these different things. It's well past needing like a cork board with lines connected to each other. It is the full doc with notes upon notes upon notes of how everything connects together. But Crusader has that thing that I loved so much about the Piper, which is the really interesting narration, the really heartfelt story that feels like just this old man trying to tell you about this traumatic experience he had that he doesn't know if you'll believe him or not, but he's going to tell you anyway because it's deeply unsettled him. And I really love that. The single lidless eye and the Alexandrian tunnels, which are probably now tied to the, not tied as in like physically tied, but tied as in like metaphorically tied to the archives. Because the tunnels there are really special because they were built by Robert Smirk. We're going to get there. There's so much. There's so much to try and tie in here. But we get into things like Hard Shoulder, which is the stairway that is horrifying, right, in the coffins. First edition, where we have a really interesting relationship between Mary Key and Gertrude Robinson. And also some terrifying things happening there with the books. Then we have the end of the tunnel with the shadow creatures, and Melanie King is related in there. Burial rites, which is horrifying to think about. A person that has become death but now can no longer die because of it, but has already been mummified, or was mummified after the fact because the Egyptians didn't know what else to do and because they honor death, and so the person is perpetually dying. That is horrifying. Perfect tragedy. I love it. I love tragedy so much when it happens in fiction and not to me. Then we get Binary, which is wonderful and super evocative and crunchy in a way that you could feel that biting of the keyboard keys. Held in Customs is really terrifying. Not for me personally. I mean, I can understand the idea of like being crushed in a small enclosed space being terrifying. It's not one of my fears, but just the idea of it alone is terrifying, right? And that's, I guess, my big thing with this season is little by little by little, I just got more and more invested in these statements. And part of it is getting more invested in Jonathan Sims, right? And in the cast. But as I got more and more invested in the statements, even things that I don't personally have as a fear, I found to be deeply unsettling. Burning Desire. It's a really interesting one. It's kind of a very different take, but it still is pretty creepy. Tale of the Field Hospital is incredible, and I loved it so much with the plague and everything happening there. Thought for the Day is really interesting. I liked that one. It didn't resonate with me as much as some of the others, but it was solid. Book of the Dead, however, is horrifying. Because nothing you can do can change it. Underground was really interesting. The Shovel Man has me invested. I want to know what's going on there. And I don't know if this this is tied to being trapped, being enclosed, dying underground or in the dark. Is it tied to the dark or is it a different entity? Again, don't tell me. I'll figure it out on my own, please. Takeaway with the meat. I feel like out of every episode in the season, that's the one I need to re-listen to. I'm getting too excited. I can't speak. I need to re-listen to that one the most because though I recognize the name Tom Hand from the previous meat episode, it didn't hit me right away. And I feel like there's more context there, but there's definitely some interesting things. Like he got his finger chopped off that his ring was on, but his ring is on that finger over there, but he still has a finger. Is that tied to the shapeshifters in some way? The Not Them, as we find out they're called? Probably not, but we'll find out. But, man, Police Lights is good. Fatigue is good and terrifying. I didn't even talk about Helen. Poor Helen. I didn't even talk about poor Helen. With the New Door. I completely skipped over the New Door somehow. That is terrifying. And the fact that she gets mentioned again later by Tim and Martin is just... Yes. Yes, we're going to talk about Michael. A Long Way Down. Tying back into Michael Crew. Tying back into this thing that can just take people. And just throw them forever. Not a good thought, right? But it's the smell of blood, the build-up there of Jonathan Sims is no longer, turning away Melanie King. And in fact, they almost seem to have become friends in all this because he believes her now. Where she reveals that that's not Sasha. And everything changes. We get this series of statements that are just about the not them. And I mentioned this before. That's what this podcast started with for me. That's what hooked me. Was the creature pretending to be a person in anglerfish, right? The Kind Mother and the Distant Cousin are both incredible episodes where I feel like this podcast, as much as I love Crusader, and that's maybe my favorite episode of the season, Field Hospital is really good too, though. Tale of Field Hospital. Kind Mother, Distant Cousin, Hide and Seek, Into the Librarian. Magnus Archives was always good, but it's a step up. It's a progression forward that I really, really love. Because we get this series of episodes all tied into the one creature that make it more and more horrifying as it goes. It was already creepy enough when it was just a creature that replaced people, right? When it was just the thing that took their place. that rewrote people's memories, that changed all the pictures. But now we know there are some people that it doesn't work on, and it loves that. It taunts them. It is overjoyed to see their pain and their torment. And that makes this creature, it goes from like maybe a beast that is just trying to eat and survive to something horrifying. And in hide and seek, when we get to hear not Sasha chasing John and just like taunting him the whole way, and the only thing that breaks him, the only thing that makes him speak up and give away his position, is not it taunting him about his job, it's not it taunting him about being the archivist or anything like that, or stupid decisions that he makes. It's taunting him about Sasha and what it did to her, because Jonathan Sims loves his assistants and he cares about his assistants deeply. And that's what leads him to break the table. Because in Distant Cousin, we get Adelar Deckard been mentioned before. The Stranger was mentioned by Gertrude. What? And okay, so much to talk about here. The table is mentioned, and John is losing it. He's falling apart. He's becoming completely unraveled. Which is also why I didn't shave here, because I wanted to look unkempt, like John must have looked unkempt. I probably could have mussed up my hair more for it, but there we go. But he's losing his mind. And so he just wrecks the table that is binding the not them. And we got to talk about all that and how the not them has used the table and sent her friends to move the table around so that she can attack people and taunt people there. And the friends that move the table are almost assuredly Breakin and Hope, who move it in a box. When I got to that part, I literally had to pull over. I listen to these episodes in the car so that I can just focus on them. If I'm at the house and I'm working, then I'm not just focusing on what I'm listening to, because I have something else. All three monitors are here. My phone's going off. I've got YouTube comments coming in, and none of those are complaints, but it means that if I'm at the house and I'm in this office, I'm not able to focus on something that's just audio, right? Which may sound completely ridiculous when I edit audio, but I'm focused on Premiere at the time, right? So maybe I could throw it into a Premiere timeline and then I'd be okay. But I listen to them first while I'm driving, and then when I get home from driving, I copy the notes back down, which is also partly why it takes so long, because I have to listen to every episode twice, and also I don't drive a lot because I work from home most of the time. But I had to pull over because I was so overwhelmed with the realization that Breakin and Hope were the ones moving the tables in the boxes, and that's part of what they've been doing this whole time. The coffins are tied into that somehow, and it's possible the coffins are actually not them trapped in there. I don't think so, but the possibility alone was enough to overwhelm me. Realistically, I think it's probably that they just move the table, but they also move the coffins, so maybe they're tied to all the entities. I don't know. Don't tell me. But it was enough to overwhelm me, and I had to pull over. This leads us into Michael, the distortion, the spiral, taunting Tim and Martin and threatening to kill them, and that wonderful line before that. I'm all out of sorts timeline-wise, but that wonderful line of, "You need a door." And then Jonathan Sims meeting Jurgen Leitner, as he's saved by Jurgen Leitner using one of the books to move the geometry of Robert Smirk's tunnels to trap the not them. Jurgen Leitner gives his statement, his hubris, his idea of being able to trap the books and be the guardian of the books absolutely did not work. He had almost 1,000 of them, stamped them all with his image, his name, so that if people found him, he could find them again, and tested them on his assistants and had them all ripped away from him when the entities attacked. And this is when we find out, of course, they are the entities. The eye, the beholding, the unknowing for John, and the archives, the distortion, the spiral, and then I assume the sky or the vast, the death or the dead, the fire maybe for the lightless flame, or is that just still the dark? Because I assume it has to be, like, the dark has to be one with how much happens in the dark. The flesh maybe, or the blood. The what is the bugs? Is that decay, the decay, or the desolation, or the hive, or the web for the spider, or is that also tied into the spiral? Don't tell me the answer to any of these. I want to find them all out on my own, please. But just the idea of all of this coming together, all of this horror, all of these entities attacking at once to claim these books that are like fingertips that they can have to poke into this dimension without even meaning to, really. It makes me think so much of Azathoth. I almost said Azathoth. The blind idiot god in Lovecraft's work, who creates and destroys universes without even realizing he's doing it. Just, I'm so into all this, and all of that would be big enough. All of that would be reveal enough. But Elias kills Jürgen Leitner. He beats him to death with something. There's so much here. Elias is working with someone. Whether he's working for the Eye and the Eye is trying to suppress Leitner and John's attempts to learn more, or if he's working for a different entity and he's been placed here to try and hamper the Eye's efforts, because the Not Them makes the comment that if she can become John, can she rob the Eye of its pupil? Which makes it seem like John is as the archivist is uncovering things for the Eye. Is the Eye benevolent, or is the Eye just as bad? I don't know. Again, please don't tell me. But Elias is definitely working against John. It kills Jürgen Leitner. So John no longer has the answers. He's going to have to go back to the statements. And of course, it had to be that way, right? But I expected an entity would get Leitner. I didn't think it would be Elias. There is so much more to this. And I can't wait to get into it. It's probably going to be a while till season 3's, because I'm going on vacation soon, which means it's going to set that even further. But please let me know your thoughts about season 2. Anything you want to talk about season 2 revealed up to season 2 spoilers in the comments, please do. I love talking about Magnus Archives with people, and I don't have anybody in my life really that listens to it as well. So please, if you like this, talk to me about it in the comment section down below, but only up to season 2. Please don't spoil anything for me. And if I didn't notice anything from these episodes, absolutely you can highlight it. But if it requires like future knowledge, please don't tell me. I want to find these things out for myself, because those moments where it shakes my brain, as Sakamaki Dado would say, are my favorite moments of this podcast. It is the moments where something hits me and I go, oh, okay, that I love so much. Let me know your thoughts on the Magnus Archives Season 2 in the comment section down below. What was your favorite episode? And until next time, it might be Distant Cousins, actually, really. Crusader is great. Distant Cousin might be my favorite episode, just because the reveals. But until next time, I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that the Magnus Archives has to offer. Supplemental. I made my way into the archives. I saw the man in the coat. I'm pretty sure he's after me. I don't think I have much time. Maybe now I can find what I'm looking for. If I can just find some clues that can pin this on Elias, then maybe I can help John. Do you hear that? Is that thunder? And music. It's so beautiful. Is that a door?